Hello everyone, welcome to today's presentation. We'll be exploring indefinite and reflexive pronouns. This is our grammar power-up session, designed to boost your understanding and confidence. Over the next few slides, we'll cover what these pronouns are, how to use them correctly, and some helpful tips. I'm excited to get started, so let's dive in. A pronoun is a word that takes the place of a noun. Think of it as a shortcut in our sentences, helping us avoid repeating the same nouns over and over again. This makes our sentences sound smoother and more natural. You can think of pronouns as the super substitutes. They step in for nouns whenever we want our writing or speaking to flow better. So, understanding pronouns is key to mastering clear and effective communication, which is what this whole presentation is about. All right, let's talk about key rule number 1. Indefinite pronouns can be either singular or plural, so it's really important to use the correct verb form that matches them. For example, if you're referring to a singular indefinite pronoun, you'll use a singular verb. And if it's plural, then you'll need a plural verb. It's all about agreement, just like with any other subject and verb. Now, moving on to the definition. Indefinite pronouns are words that don't point to a specific person, place, or thing. Instead, they are general and nonspecific. They're used when we want to talk about people or things in a broad sense, not something particular. And that leads us to the key idea. They're not specific, they're just general. For example, words like someone, anything, or everything. They help us refer to any person or thing without nomming a particular one. Finally, two common indefinite pronouns we often see are who and what. These are used to ask questions or to refer to unspecified people or things. Remember, understanding these concepts helps us communicate more clearly and accurately, especially when dealing with general statements in our writing or speaking. Let's dive into some key pronouns today, starting with the basics: all, any, none, and some. These are what we call indefinite pronouns because they don't refer to a specific person or thing. They help us talk about quantities in a general way. Next, we have the word either, which can be used with singular or plural nouns. It often appears in situations where you're choosing between two options or indicating a choice. Then there are words like both, few, many, and several. These are used with plural nouns to describe quantities or groups. For example, both refers to two items, while many or several suggest larger groups. Moving on to plural examples, words like another, anything, each, everyone, nothing, one, and someone. These are commonly used in sentences to refer to people or things in a nonspecific way, often focusing on individual members within a group or an unspecified object. For singular examples, you'll notice everyone, someone, nothing, and all. These are singular in form but refer to larger groups or indefinite ideas, helping us create more flexible and inclusive sentences. Finally, I want to highlight that these indefinite pronouns form a big, important list in English. They are essential because they allow us to speak about people, objects, or ideas without being too specific, making our language more fluid and adaptable. Understanding how to use them correctly really enriches our communication, especially when discussing quantities and general references. Now let's look at how these examples demonstrate the use of indefinite pronouns in action. In the first example, all is well with Papa, we see a singular indefinite pronoun, all paired with the singular verb is. This shows us that when we use all as an indefinite pronoun, it takes a singular verb. Moving to the second example, nothing has been painted yet. The word nothing is also singular and takes the singular verb has been. This pattern is similar to the first example and emphasizes that words like nothing require singular verbs. Finally, in the third example, several play instruments and one claps to the music. We see a slightly different case. Here, several is a plural indefinite pronoun, so it takes the plural verb play. Meanwhile, one is singular and takes the singular verb claps. These examples highlight that indefinite pronouns can be singular or plural, and it's important to match them with the correct verb form. Understanding this helps us communicate clearly and correctly, especially when talking about unspecified persons or things. Now, Let's see these concepts in action as we explore more examples together. Let's take a closer look at these sentences and identify the indefinite pronouns in each. In the first sentence, I looked everywhere for my umbrella, but I couldn't find it. The word everywhere is an indefinite pronoun because it refers to an unspecified place. Moving to the second sentence, the butler took care of everything in the house. The word everything is the indefinite pronoun, as it refers to all unspecified tasks or things. In the third sentence, my mother saw someone shoplifting from the chocolate aisle. The word someone is the indefinite pronoun, indicating an unspecified person. And finally, in the fourth sentence, taking care of the environment is everyone's responsibility. The word everyone's contains the indefinite pronoun everyone, which refers to all people without specifying who. The key point here is that indefinite pronouns help us talk about things or people in a general way when we don't have or need specific details. Recognizing these words helps us communicate clearly and effectively, especially when discussing broad ideas or responsibilities like caring for the environment. Let's take a closer look at the key rule here. Reflexive pronouns always end in self for singular and selves for plural. It's a simple pattern, but an important one to remember. Now, what exactly are reflexive pronouns? Well, they are words that reflect the action of the verb back onto the subject of the sentence. In other words, the action is happening to the same person or thing that is doing the action. That's why we say, the action reflects. These pronouns are like looking in a mirror. They look back at the subject. So when you're identifying or using reflexive pronouns, remember, look back to the subject of the sentence. They serve as a mirror, showing us who is performing and receiving the action at the same time. Keep this in mind, and you'll be able to spot reflexive pronouns easily and understand their role in sentences. Let's clarify an important note first. Reflexive pronouns are not used as the subject of a sentence. For example, you wouldn't say, myself went to the store, but rather, I went to the store. Now, when we look at reflexive pronouns, you'll notice they change depending on whether we're talking about singular or plural forms. For plural, we have ourselves, yourselves, and themselves. In the singular form, the reflexive pronouns are myself, yourself, himself, herself, and itself. It's helpful to remember that these pronouns are used when the subject and the object of the sentence are the same person or thing. And finally, the key takeaway here is that reflexive pronouns come in both singular and plural forms, and it's crucial to use them correctly to avoid confusion or grammatical errors. Now let's take a closer look at this slide. Here, we see how reflexive pronouns reflect back to the subject of the sentence, creating a special kind of connection. For example, in the first example, I taught myself how to play piano. The reflexive pronoun, myself, shows that I am both the teacher and the learner. It emphasizes that I did this on my own. Moving to the second example, Long sees herself as a future senator. The reflexive pronoun, herself, reflects back to Long, indicating her own perception of her future. It highlights how reflexive pronouns help us understand personal perspectives and self-awareness. And in the third example, the members surprised themselves by making it to the championship. The reflexive, themselves, emphasizes that the members were surprised by their own achievement. It adds a layer of emphasis, showing that the action is directed back to the doers. Overall, these examples showcase how reflexive pronouns are essential for expressing actions that the subject performs on itself, adding clarity and emphasis. Keep these in mind as we continue exploring how they function in different contexts. All right, let's move on to slide 10. Here, we're focusing on completing sentences with the correct reflexive pronoun. This is a practical skill that helps us communicate clearly and accurately. When you see a sentence like, I went to the art exhibition by, you need to think about who is performing the action on themselves. In this case, it would be myself, so the complete sentence is, I went to the art exhibition by myself. It's important to recognize that reflexive pronouns are used when the subject and the object of the sentence are the same person or thing. This concept is especially useful in everyday conversations and writing because it adds clarity and emphasis. For example, the cat groomed itself clearly shows that the cat is doing the grooming to itself, not someone else. As you practice, try to remember the key reflexive pronouns: myself, yourself, himself, herself, itself, ourselves, yourselves, themselves. Using the correct one depends on the subject of the sentence. By mastering this, you'll improve your ability to express actions that are done by and to the same person or thing, which is a fundamental part of effective communication. Keep practicing these sentences, and you'll find it becomes more natural over time. So let's talk about reflexive actions. These are actions that reflect back to the subject, like in the example, he cut himself. It's a way of showing that the action is happening to the person performing it. Now moving on to the term reflexive, which generally refers to actions that are directed back at the subject, but in a more general, non-specific way. For example, everyone is here. It's not pointing to a specific individual, but rather a group or a general situation. And then we have indefinite references, which are even more vague, like a quick review or indefinite and reflexive together. These are used when we don't specify exactly who or what is involved. The key takeaway here is that reflexive actions and indefinite references often go hand in language. They help us communicate general ideas or actions without pinpointing specific details. Understanding these concepts is essential because they form the foundation of how we express actions and references in a clear, natural way in English. They're integral to making our language more fluid and less cluttered with unnecessary specifics. You are now a master of indefinite and reflexive pronouns. That's right, you've learned how to use these colorful words to make your writing more interesting and clear. Keep practicing because the more you use them, the more natural it will feel. Remember, these pronouns help us talk about things in a more general way or reflect back on ourselves. So, keep practicing and using these words in your writing. Grammar masters, you did it. You've worked hard to understand these concepts, and now you're ready to use them confidently. Great job.